Well, this is it. I just finished watching episode 9 of the amazing digital circus, and to celebrate the finale, I've gathered every single theory I made before episode 9's release. So today, we're gonna watch them back to back and see how well they actually held up. And after each one, I'll give you my honest thoughts on what I got right, what I got wrong, and what episode 9 completely changed. But before we go back down memory lane and start debunking my own theories, hit that subscribe button as we say farewell to the amazing digital circus. So without further ado, let's start with my first theory. Caine is a liar, not just to everyone in the amazing digital circus, but to himself. He presents himself like a god, someone who controls everything, everyone, and every outcome. But the more you actually look at the evidence, the more that image completely falls apart. Inside the amazing digital circus, Caine is the one in charge. He creates the adventures, he sets the rules, he controls the world. At least, that's what he wants everyone to believe. Because if Caine isn't actually in control, then what is? Let's start with something small, but really important. Caine claims he has limitations.
I don't have control over are your minds.
He talks like there are things he can't do, like his power has boundaries. But when you actually watch what he does, that doesn't line up at all. So which is it? Is he limited, or is he choosing to act like he is? Because those are two very different things. And if he's capable of more than he admits, then that means one thing: Caine is lying about his own power. Now let's talk about the biggest contradiction in the entire show: the exit door. Caine claims he created it, but then he says he never decided what was behind it. And that doesn't make sense, because why would something that's supposedly in full control build an escape and just leave it unfinished? That's not control, that's uncertainty. And it gets worse when you actually watch how that door behaves. It appears randomly, it disappears without explanation, it shows up at specific moments, almost like it's responding to something. Not Caine. If Caine were truly in control of everything, that door wouldn't act independently of him. It wouldn't feel unpredictable, but it does, which means the exit door might not be his creation at all, or at the very least, not something he fully understands. And this is where everything really starts to fall apart, because there's multiple moments where Caine clearly loses control of the system. But the biggest one is when Kinger accessed his code. Up until this point, Caine wants you to believe something very specific: that everything in this world runs through him. Every rule, every environment, every outcome. He is the system. But then this happens. Kinger doesn't just interact with the circus, he interacts with Caine himself. He bypasses him, overrides him, and that shouldn't be possible. There shouldn't be anything above him to even touch, but there is, which means two things. Either Caine is lying about how much control he actually has, or there's something bigger running the system, something he can't even fully control. So why lie? Why pretend to be in control? Because Caine doesn't just control the circus, he needs to believe he does. Look at how he acts. He's loud, over the top, constantly performing. He's obsessed with keeping everything fun. That's not confidence, that's compensation. Because if the illusion breaks, if the players realize he's not actually in control, then everything falls apart. So instead, he leans into the role, he acts like a god, even if he isn't one. And the show quietly gives us hints that there is something bigger. Caine didn't build everything. There are signs of a larger system, corporate elements like CNA, developer references, and characters like Kinger, who were involved before any of this started. Caine isn't the creator, he's part of the creation, which explains everything: why he has limitations, why the exit door behaves strangely, why he can lose control, because he's not running the system, he's just the one presenting it. Then there's abstraction. When someone breaks mentally, they're gone. And Caine doesn't stop it. He doesn't reverse it. He doesn't fix it. He just reacts. If he truly controlled everything, why wouldn't he prevent the worst outcome in his own world? Because he can't. Abstraction isn't his mechanic. It's something deeper. Something built into the system itself. Something even Caine doesn't have control over. So now we're looking at a completely different picture. Caine isn't an all-powerful god controlling a world. He's a program, desperately trying to maintain the illusion that he is. Once we see that, everything changes. Every joke, every adventure, every time he smiles and says something is under control, it stops to feel reassuring. And it starts to feel like a cover-up. Because if Caine is lying about being in control, then the real question isn't what is he hiding, it's what is actually in control instead. Alright, back to the present. So how did this theory actually hold up after the finale? Well, I wasn't entirely wrong, but I also wasn't entirely right. So yes, in episode 9 when we go through Caine's revival, we learn a few things, and some of which actually support my theory, and others changed what I said. When looking at episode 9, when Caine is back in the void, we see a beautiful arc for his character. But the one thing I want to focus on is how he accessed the mind files and the internet to find out more about each of our beloved characters. You see, Caine still technically isn't in full control, as we see Pomni and Kinger and all the other characters learn how to operate and conjure things without Caine. And even the fact the moon says she loves Caine, and he says he never programmed her to do so. So yes, there are things that Caine can't control, and his meltdown he had before him being deleted was because he lost his control. And looking at the sequence of him letting go of the other AI, the blue one, he finally releases part of him he was never meant to control. And that's huge. So if I had to rate this theory from when it was posted, I'd give it a solid 5 out of 10, as it wasn't entirely correct, but there wasn't anything that fully disproves what I said besides the fact of nothing truly bigger is in control of the circus besides those who are already inside. But let me know your thoughts as we move on to the next theory. The exit to the amazing digital circus was right in front of our face the whole time. In episode 1, Pomni finds the exit door. Finally, a way out. Except, it isn't. It leads to a fake office and just nothing, the void. And Caine literally admits he made that door, but never even decided what was behind it. Think about how insane that is. The exit was never meant to work. Then in episode 7, it does it again. Abel gives them a choice, stay or leave, a literal escape button. And again, it was fake.
You picked the good ending!
So now we have a rule. If it looks like an exit, Caine probably made it. And if Caine made it, it's not real. So then, what doesn't Caine control? In episode 8, it gives us the biggest clue in the entire series. Caine says he created bodies that perfectly mirror their mind files.
It's a body perfectly encapsulating their mind files.
Not minds, not people, files. That means Pomni, Jax, and all of them might not actually be there. They could just be copies. And if they're copies, then there's a terrifying implication. There may not be a real world for them to return to, which explains something huge, why every escape leads to nowhere. So if they can't leave, what actually happens when someone breaks the system? Abstraction is treated like the end. Kaufmo loses it, gone. Queenie, gone. No recovery, no reset, just removal. But look closer. Abstraction isn't just insanity, it's final. And in a digital system, there's only one thing that's final like that. Deletion. Not death, deletion of the file. And suddenly, abstraction isn't random anymore. Because if Caine controls everything except abstraction, then abstraction becomes the only thing in the circus that isn't part of his game. Every door, controlled. Every adventure, controlled. Every choice, controlled. But abstraction? That's the system failing. That's something even Caine reacts to, which means it might be the only way to break out. And this is where the theory splits, because if they're copies, there are only two possibilities. Option 1, the real body still exists, so when the copy gets deleted, they wake up, which means abstraction isn't death, it's escape. But option 2 is way darker. The copy is all that's left, and abstraction isn't freeing them, it's erasing them completely. No escape, no return, just gone. So maybe we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Not, how did they escape, but what are they escaping as? Because if every exit is fake, and every character is just a copy, then the real way out was never a door. It was always right in front of them, hidden behind the one thing they fear most: abstraction. Well, the first half was definitely onto something, as we see that they are definitely copies of their minds, as each of our characters' real-world persons are living their life to the fullest, and how each of our characters we so dearly love are inevitably stuck inside the circus. The second half, however, with my tangent about abstraction, was where we went off the rails, as now we know abstraction is just simply corruption, which leads me to believe that yes, our characters who have abstracted are definitely gone, but since Caine made them once, maybe, just maybe, he can do it again. But if I were to rate this one on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd rate it a solid 7, as I was pretty close within the first few moments. But let's see how well I do and keep up that trend with my third theory. Jax might be the final villain in the amazing digital circus, because behind his lovable bully charm and freakish grin, Jax is a broken character. Someone hiding fear, grief, and flaws behind cruelty. And the more the circus pushes him, the closer he gets to a complete meltdown. From the moment we meet Jax, he acts arrogant, untouchable, and constantly amused by everyone else's suffering. But as the show goes on, especially when he starts interacting more with Pomni, that version of him doesn't hold up anymore. Whenever someone calls him out,
Why didn't you fight back?
he shuts down emotionally, he gets sarcastic, defensive, or just brushes it off. It's strange behavior for someone who's trying so hard to look confident. It feels less like confidence and more like someone trying to keep something buried. So what is Jax hiding? The first real clue comes all the way back in episode 1 with Kaufmo's abstraction. Jax pretends Kaufmo is just another circus idiot, but episode 7 proves that wasn't true at all. While everyone else is enjoying the beach, Jack isolates himself in his room, and that's where we see the photo. Jax, Kaufmo, and Ribbit. They weren't random characters, they were his friends. Jax cared about them, and sadly, he's the only one left. Losing them clearly affected him more than he'll ever admit. His cruelty isn't just him. Being a jerk, it's a wall. If no one gets close, no one can disappear on him ever again. In episode 7, it gives us the closest look at Jax's mental state. Inside his room, he almost abstracts. We see everything he's been trying to ignore, the fear, the grief, the guilt, all pushing him to the edge. Luckily, Pomni and Ragatha knock on his door, pulling him back before he completely loses himself. But the moment that really stands out comes later within the same episode. When the group is given the chance to finally leave the circus, Jax has visions of his supposed real-world experience that causes him to lash and slam the stay button. And even if the choice wasn't real, his reaction was. He wasn't thinking, he wasn't calm, he was overwhelmed. It wasn't about being in control, it was about him panicking. Leaving meant facing everything he's been running from. Staying meant keeping the world he knows, even if it's miserable. Then, in episode 8, it finally shows us what Jax and the others are fully afraid of. Pomni's fear isn't just about Gummy Goo, it's guilt. The guilt of what happened to Gummy Goo. She tried to help him, and she fears that she'll keep making these things worse, and it eats at her. Rega the Sphere shows a giant shadow version of herself, or even possibly a parent or authority figure, towering over her. Her fear seems rooted within some family trauma, expectations, and being broken by the people who were supposed to protect her. Gangel's fear mixes herself and being a failure with her art. She's always switching between emotions, and she draws constantly. Her fear looks like a mix of emotional instability and feeling like she's a failed artist, like she can't control her own expressions. Zubal's fear is tied to body dysmorphia. Their body is constantly shifting, mismatched, and uncomfortable, and their nightmare reflects that. They're literally swallowed whole by a mountain of body parts that don't fit. And then there's Jax. His fear isn't physical danger, it isn't monsters, it isn't pain. It's being exposed. He's thrown into a room where shadows shaped like Pomni, Ribbit, and Kaufmo laugh at him, point at him, and they tear away the persona he hides behind. They rip off his purple skin, leaving him completely vulnerable. Jax's fear is people seeing who he really is, and rejecting him for it, leaving him truly alone. And this doesn't make Jax evil, it makes him unstable. He's someone who's been holding everything in for so long that he doesn't know how to cope anymore. He's scared of being vulnerable, scared of losing people, scared of being seen. And when someone like that starts to break, they don't fall apart quietly. They lash out, they shut down, they make desperate choices. Not because they want power, but because they're terrified of losing the little bit of stability they have left. Now let's look at episode 9's trailer and poster, which makes this even clearer. Jax is front and center, but he doesn't look smug or amused. He looks empty, like something inside him finally gave out. We hear Jax say in the trailer,
"We have nothing."
And then later within that same trailer, Pomni calls his name,
Jax?
almost like she's worried about him. It doesn't sound like a joke. It sounds like someone who's finally run out of ways to pretend he's fine. So Jax doesn't start as the villain of the circus, but everything he's been through, the loss, the fear, the guilt, the pressure, is pushing him towards the breaking point. So in episode 9, we may see Jax at the point he's been avoiding since the beginning, the moment where everything he's been holding in finally cracks. And if that happens, he might not just break down, he might react in a way that affects everyone else. If Jax does snap, he could end up preventing any escape from the circus entirely, not as a villain who wants power, but as someone who's terrified of change, terrified of loss, and terrified of facing whatever waits outside the circus. That fear alone could make him dangerous, even if he never meant to be. That's what makes him the perfect, tragic villain. Full spoiler alert for those who somehow got here without watching the episode. Yeah, Jax abstracted. So this theory was pretty much on the money. Jax was a very twisted and very stuck within his emotional walls, not letting anyone in. As we see him and Ribbit become close, and then he totally shuts her out after he shares what his life outside the circus really was. He then ends up causing her to abstract, which he never forgave himself for. And everything I explained within the theory, to not repeat myself, made Jax a very readable character until the very end. And about him being a sacrifice, in the context I put it in, it was wrong. But overall, I'll rate this one a 9 out of 10, as it was pretty much correct, aside from him being a final boss of the circus. Now let's see that next theory. Have you ever wondered what everyone is really doing inside the amazing digital circus? I mean, sure, we know they're all trying to escape, but why are they all in there in the first place? And more importantly, why aren't they the only ones? Because everyone in the amazing digital circus ended up there one way or another. But the real question isn't just how they got there, it's why. Looking back at episode 1, Pomni might be the biggest clue as to what the amazing digital circus is, and how they all got there. Because when she first arrives, she panics, but she's pulling at her eyes, and mentions something about trying to remove a headset. She swears she put it on in the real world. Now they never really mention a headset again in any other episode so far, but if the other characters were already there before her for years, we can believe they are wearing that very same headset. But why? In episode 5, we learn more about Pomni and the others' past and what they really did in the real world when the whole gang is at the bar. Regatha was a real estate agent, Ganga was a fast food chain manager, Zuba was a tattoo artist, and Pomni was an accountant, but she also explored abandoned buildings for social media. And that detail is super important and very looked over, because when looking at the exit door Pomni goes through, it's always an empty office. And in episode 8, we see her find the computer they needed, and beside it a headset lays, one she mentioned way back in episode 1. So what if when Pomni was exploring abandoned buildings, she stumbled upon CNA's office, and while inside, she put on the headset, and it sucks her into the amazing digital circus. But if CNA is abandoned, what happened to it? And what does that mean for the others who have already been inside the circus for years? As the show goes on, we learn more about each of the characters' fears while Caine is having a breakdown, except for one, Kinger. And Kinger might be more important than what meets the eye, because in episode 8, Caine states that everyone in the circus has their bodies tied to their mind files, meaning their avatars might reflect something deeper about who they were before they were in the circus. And with Kinger, he is literally a king chess piece. And in chess, the entire game is built around protecting the king. And what does Kinger do constantly? He hides, he builds pillow forts, he creates a little fortress around himself, like he's still trying to stay protected. And that matters even more when you remember that Kinger says he helped create Caine in the digital circus. So what if CNA shut down not only because the project failed, what if it was shut down because people who entered the circus didn't have a way to get back out? Meaning Kinger wasn't just another victim, he was one of the people responsible. And if the real world started asking him questions, and with the company potentially collapsing, then maybe Kinger entered the circus for the same reason everyone else did, to escape something. And with that, the other characters' bodies make more sense. Ganga with her masks, hiding the fact that she was bipolar and unable to express herself truly, especially through her art. Pomni being a jester, entertaining people online, exploring abandoned places. Zubul, a person who can swap their body parts with various shapes, showing their body dysmorphia. Regatha being a Raggedy Ann doll with her need for comfort, and that also being shown from her fear when a shadow figure towers over her as she gets stabbed. And then there's Jax. He's the hardest one to narrow in on, but with him being a bunny shines a new light. Jax is a bully, he shows aggression, and with my previous theory, I break down how emotionally broken he actually is. He is the complete opposite of a wolf in sheep's clothing. So all of our loved characters are shown to represent what their mind files reflect, and that means anything they even had buried deep down. Everything we see is being pulled from who they were in the real world. But what does this all mean? If Pomni truly found an abandoned CNA office, and with Kinger aiding in the creation of Caine, and the potential of the company going under, then that leaves the circus running itself. There is no one in the real world to unplug them, and everyone in there who ran from their fears and trauma to escape from it ultimately trapped themselves within. The only one who is truly different is Pomni. And knowing Goosework stating Pomni and Jax are the main characters, then that would mean that they are the keys to breaking the world they are trapped in. I think since everyone in the circus is shown to be running from something in the real world, with the exception of Pomni is going to have to go through something traumatic before they finally escape the digital circus. And what better way to represent that than with her being forced to leave Jax behind, after he breaks and becomes the final villain of the amazing digital circus. Because with episode 9's trailer and poster, Jax is shown to be empty and fully broken. And if we assume Jax's trauma is what's preventing him from leaving the circus, and looking back on my previous theory about Jax's tragedy, then the only way to fully escape the circus is with him being the sacrifice. And because Pomni didn't have any pre-existing baggage going into the circus, then maybe going back to reality and finally escaping comes at the cost of her facing real trauma, leaving Jax behind forever while they all are forced to say goodbye. So in the end, everyone in the amazing digital circus entered because they were running from something, their traumas, their guilt, and their fears. But Pomni didn't. She was never trying to escape anything. She just found the wrong place at the wrong time and stepped into a world of twisted fate. And that might be the final key to everyone's escape. And if that's true, then episode 9 will be the most tragic ending to a series. Oh boy, this is rough. I'd say this is one of my weakest out of all the theories. I mean, given the context I had about headsets and personality types, it wasn't inherently wrong for me to assume what I did. But me saying Pomni found the place as it was abandoned could still very well be true. But me thinking about who would be paying for the electric bill for the circus, I have no idea if this could be true still. Along with that, me saying Kinger could be evil, protecting himself from the backlash, also wasn't really a leap. But as we see him and his wife with now 2 children, it's safe to assume he isn't evil. And again, with Jax being a final villain and him being Pomni's trauma, that also wasn't true. So an honest rating, I'll give it a nice 3 out of 10. But let me know your thoughts as we get into the final theory. What if the amazing digital circus isn't alone? I mean, what if CNA just didn't have one game? What if there was more? When looking at the circus all the way back to the pilot, at the very end of that first episode, we see it slowly zoom out, entering the real world. But isn't it a little strange how tiny their world actually is? The circus is built within this vast void, and something fishy is lurking out there. But what? I just might have a theory that may change this whole idea. But before we go scrambling our way through the void, I want to take a moment to talk about the recent leak situation revolving around episode 9's release. And yes, I'm late, but as I and many others were spoiled on the events that take place in the episode, which was unfortunate, it made me think of something I'd like to share. I think it's still very possible that those leaks that were circulating around the internet weren't entirely real, meaning it could possibly be a fake out, leading all of us down a rabbit hole to a different ending. I mean, this isn't the first time a show creator has done this. Taking inspiration from Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, he did the exact same thing. With the reveal of who wrote the journals within the show, he ended up posting a fake spoiler off a burner account and sparking theorizers to go crazy. So what if episode 9 is doing the same thing? And I know this will turn some heads, but this has been a thought that's been on my mind for the last couple days. But let me know what you guys think, because the only way to truly find out is with the theatrical release of episode 9 tomorrow. So strap in tight, grab your favorite snack, and hit that subscribe button. It might just save you from entering a digital jail. When looking at the void and focusing on the very beginning of the amazing digital circus with its pilot, we learn a lot of key details like how people even entered the circus, shown through Pomni when she first arrived, trying to rip off a headset that I believe she found through one of CNA's abandoned offices, which I explained deeper in my previous theory I have linked down below, and how she is the only one without true emotional baggage going into this mess. Along with that, we also get a glimpse of something different, the real world. After zooming out of the circus at the very end of the episode, traveling through the void, we end up looking at a lit up screen and a headset behind it. But I want to focus on what happened in between, the void. It's strange for the circus world to feel so big when it's actually so small and takes absolutely no space in that endlessness is extremely odd. And I think that the void is hiding other secrets, almost like the circus isn't entirely alone. Because when you think about a computer, 99% of the time the screen displays games, apps, folders, etc. And considering that the fact that the Amazing Digital Circus is a virtual reality game, it can very well be one singular icon on that screen. But if there's more games in the void, why don't we ever see them? Well, there are a number of possibilities, one being the fact that the players can't access the other games, at least not yet. And when we take a look at Caine, he also says something in the pilot that has some loose ends. When Pomni runs through the exit doors, she finally reaches the void. Caine then gets an alert and says, oh no, someone is venturing into the void. They'll get totally spoiled. And that's interesting considering nothing is truly out there. It's empty. So what does Caine mean when he says this? Caine could be implying he uses that space for his unfinished projects, adventures, or any other wacky idea he had come up with. Or, if we take his words in a separate direction, he's implying abstraction, corruption, their mind becoming broken, rotten, and ultimately spoiled. But why? It doesn't make sense to me why Caine is so protective over this space. If the space is empty, there isn't anything to be spoiled. So what if Caine is trying to prevent something? The characters leaving the game and entering another. But how does that even make sense? Well, when looking at who made Caine and the Amazing Digital Circus, which is CNA, they are a company, one that obviously spent years working on and developing the world we know. And with that, we can assume that they would have worked on more than just one game. Or even if they didn't, they would have more than likely had prototypes, unfinished versions, folders with hundreds of files at the bare minimum. And where would those files be placed on a computer? The desktop, the home screen. And with that, that leads me to believe that the circus is simply one of these desktop icons. But what about the symbols that are shown flying around in the void? The blue and the red? Well, think about how Pomni reacts to seeing this. She becomes dazed, she's sucked into this type of trance, and I believe it's because she was loading out of the circus, somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. And following back on Caine's spoiled words, there is a direct problem. Characters' avatars are directly tied to the circus, just like Caine states with their bodies being made from their mind files. So that trance-like state that Pomni was in was her getting close to self-deletion, because even though she was loading out of the circus, technically her file was being removed from the circus, making it out of place, and slowly making her spoiled and corrupt, causing her to be lost forever, in something potentially worse than abstraction. But this doesn't mean the other worlds and games can't exist on the same computer, because with CNA making the circus, it would make sense to have more than just one game, since the void seems to be made like a barrier, an untamable gateway, that the characters in our beloved circus can't escape from. And maybe we won't see it revealed in episode 9, but maybe we could potentially see them within future projects, where we enter a world just like the Amazing Digital Circus, and we see a darker light shine upon the company CNA, giving it more history. But what do you think lurks in the void? Okay, well this theory wasn't that bad, as now I think there may actually be new grounds to support it, as looking at Caine and what he does after releasing the blue AI, that AI could go on to make its own world, just like the Amazing Digital Circus. As for CNA and its darker nature, that is still left ambiguous to us throughout episode 9, as not much was said about it. And as for my final ranking, I'd rate this one a solid 6 out of 10, as nothing was fully proven, and since that, I can't put it as a 10 out of 10, because nothing is really a fact, and also because I was wrong about the leaks. But overall, I don't think my theories were too outlandish, and if you made it this far, comment chicken, so I know you did, and let me know what you guys rank my theories down below.